Meetings. All right, so strategic planning with remote teams. I can get our slides to work here. We'll get them 1 second. There we go. Your hosts today are Trisha Harris, that is me, and Anna O'Byrne. I am the product evangelist at Lucid Meetings, and this webinar is co-hosted with the lovely Anna O'Byrne of Upstream Meetings. I'll be helping Anna by answering any questions you may have along the way. So feel free to just type your questions in the questions box. We'll have a poll. We'll have some questions for you. So go ahead and get acquainted with that so you can answer them for us. And then we may be able to answer them immediately, or we may just save them to the end, depending on how time goes. So just to let you know, in addition to hosting further webinars with Anna in the future, this is going to be the first in a series we'll be hosting with meeting experts over the next few months. The next webinar is specifically focused on finding great remote talent. So if you're interested in this one, you may be interested in that one too. Please visit the resources section of our website to find the full list and register for other webinars. Once this webinar is over, I will send a follow-up email with a link to the video and all the resources from this webinar. So before we begin, I have a quick poll for everyone. You want to take a look? Let me start that. Okay, and go. So the question is, are you more of a remote team interested in strategic planning, or are you B, are you familiar with strategic planning and you're just ready to take it remote? So we'd like to know ahead of time if people are more strategic planners or more kind of just focused on listening, or strategic planners. They're very familiar with strategic planning, or they're actually just wanting to take this remote. So looks like most of the people have voted. If you want to give it a couple more seconds, if you vote for me, we can kind of decide who to target. So I think we're mostly there. It looks like we're about 50-50. Okay, great. Thanks, guys. Appreciate that. And Anna, with that, I will probably go ahead and hand it over to you.
Great.
You can start your magic. Here we go.
Perfect. Yeah, so thank you so much, Trisha. I'm really excited to be here today, and this talk combines two of my favorite work topics. So nerdily enough, those are strategic planning and remote work. Right, so by way of introduction, I just wanted to give you a bit of the background on how this collaboration with Lucid Meetings came about. So a few years ago, I really had very little idea that this remote work world existed. I was familiar with telework, but the kind of scope and scale of organizations who are working place independent just wasn't on my radar. I was a management consultant for government executives, and mostly that meant, oh, sorry, pardon me?
Sorry, did you want to share your slides? I think we're
can you not see them?
Nope.
Oh, okay, hold on 1 sec. Sorry.
No problem.
Show my screen. There we go. There we go. All right. Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you. Right. So, so as I was saying, a few years ago, I was a management consultant for government executives, and mostly that meant facilitating strategic planning workshops, retreats, those sort of in-person sessions. And I really loved a lot about the work, and I loved helping their teams to get clear on where they were going, but I also felt trapped. I felt very much tethered to the downtown Toronto core and the daily commute. And I knew I wanted to work remote, but I just didn't see how it was possible with a kind of in-person service. But finally I took the plunge, and last year I was actually living in Australia on the Sunshine Coast with my family, and I was setting up what I thought would be an in-person consulting service to be ready for when I came back to Toronto this year. And it was at that time that I discovered this whole, culture shift of working remote. And I stumbled on, just a number of organizations that were saying place doesn't matter. And so as part of that, I came across Lucid Meetings, and we started to talk about how they do strategic planning in their organization. And as we discussed, we realized that this could be a real issue for remote teams. So I worked with Lucid Meetings to translate what I know about strategic planning in person into a process that works entirely online. All right, so I've told you a little bit about myself, but before I move on, I would love to know just a little bit about you. You know, I'm interested in whether you work in small business and whether do you work in a large organization? Is it, you know, for-profit, not-for-profit? Are you staff, management, owner? So it would be great if you could just type into the chat a few things about yourself so I know who I'm talking to. And I think, Trisha, is it only you who can see the answers, or can I as well? I think I can.
You can as well.
Okay.
Small business owner. I see one.
Okay, yeah, if you could tell me, because so far I'm not seeing them.
If not, I will read them out to you.
Perfect, sure.
We have a data scientist at UNC. I think that's a Charlotte. Yes, I had to.
Oh, okay. Okay, now I can see, right?
CTO at a nonprofit. Yes, and Chief Development Officer.
Okay, small business. Yep.
Great. Of a nonprofit. So it looks like we got some nonprofits in here that have remote staff in New York, San Francisco, and Portland. So we have some remote people.
Oh, that's great. Okay, and now I have to make that bar go away. Perfect. Sorry, guys. Just close that up. Sorry. Okay, that's perfect. Good. So, just what we'll cover today. I wanted to let you know that I'm not planning on diving into the details of how the process works, right? I don't want to run you through step by step how to do the strategic planning online, because anyone can download for free the complete toolkit and the individual agendas from the Lucid Meetings website. So the process is already completely mapped out for you. But today what I wanted to focus on is just really making the case for strategic planning regardless of your business model or regardless of your organization's size. And I wanted to talk about make the case for doing it remote as well. All right, so I'll be covering off these topics, and I hope that my talk will take no more than 20 minutes, followed by the bulk of our time being reserved for Q&A. But before I move on, I'd really love to know what your learning objectives are. So what did you come to this webinar hoping to learn today? So again, this is an engagement piece. If you could type into your chat box a few of your learning objectives, I'll just try to tailor my talk as much as I can to answer your questions. Okay.
If you have anything you wanted to specifically find out, just let us know ahead of time. And if not, we can always dive in and answer those if they come up.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll wait a couple seconds, see if anything pops up. And you know, as we go along, you can also type any questions or comments as well. All right, then moving on. So why strategic planning, and is it really for you? Right, so this intro is really for those of you probably in smaller teams with fewer layers, because in this kind of environment, strategic planning doesn't always happen because people are so busy implementing, and also there's just no corporate center that's demanding that, say, 3 to 5 year strategic plan from you, right? So sometimes you just dive right in, right? So I'm going to make the case for strategic planning regardless, no matter how agile you are, no matter how small you are, right? So these are the primary reasons for strategic planning, and the number one reason is really because it makes time for thinking about the future. So sometimes we have an idea of where we want to end up, but until we're forced to articulate that direction and map out how we'll arrive, it's really fantasy, to be frank, right? And I read a good quote the other day. It was something to the effect of, do small things with big things in mind so that the small things fall into place, right? And I think that's really insightful. If you start with that end in mind, you can line up the steps to get there. And I think strategic planning also encourages proactivity about change. So change can be a topic that we sometimes like to shuffle aside. You know, sometimes we want to put our head in the sand a bit about the change that we know is coming. But change is inevitable, so we do need to plan for it. And then that fourth point is about getting alignment, right? And by alignment, I mean that strategic planning gets everyone on the same page. I mean, it's not the document that gets people on the same page, it's the process of strategic planning. And being aligned empowers people to make better decisions day to day because they know the end that they're aiming at. And then, you know, talking about day-to-day chaos, I'm sure many of you experience this. And strategic planning, to a certain extent, is going to mitigate crisis management because instead of being reactive to opportunities and risks, you can be more proactive because you've anticipated those events. And even when something unanticipated comes your way, you can deal with it just a little bit more, you know, rationally by returning to your strategic plan and saying, okay, this is what we said we need to do. So, you know, we can defer, we can accept, and so on. So finally, strategic planning helps you to use your resources in a planned and focused manner. So how does this sound to people? Can I ask you to do one thing? Can you just, again, an engagement piece, type into the comments which one of these things, which one of these reasons to do strategic planning resonates most with you. So if you just use the numbers associated with each bullet as a guide, just tell me which stands out to you as the biggest and most important reason for you to do strategic planning. Okay, I'll just wait a second for those comments to come in. Oops. Right, okay. Alignment, number 5 and 4. Mitigate day-to-day chaos and using resources intentionally. That's good. Now I have to get back up to my other slide here. Team alignment, right? Perfect. Great. Okay, thank you. Okay. So next, just so that we're all on the same page, I'm going to go through, you know, a few fun slides on what strategic planning is and what it's not. And my aim here is just to illustrate how much easier it is than you may believe. So it's not about sorting through a list of pet projects or to-do items, as I'm sure many of you know, but you know, I do speak with business owners who, when I ask them a question about how they do strategic planning, they'll tell me about their project management methodology. So there can be some confusion there. And the strategic plan will help you to better plan for those projects, but it's really looking at a much higher level. Oops. So it's looking at what are the handful of things that you need to focus on in the next 12 months or 2 years, or sometimes an even longer time horizon, and why do these focus areas matter? Who are our most important stakeholders? How long can we give ourselves to reach these goals, and what will goal attainment really look like? So what it's not, as illustrated here, it's not something that you're going to seal in a vault, that you're going to laminate, that's going to you know, be like a paperweight on your desk. And it's also not about complicated spreadsheets for most of us, right? And although strategic planning appeals to, you know, the rational side of our brain, it isn't necessarily a process that moves from point A to point A, B to point C. You know, there is actually some back and forth. So as you plan, you'll work from the top down, but sometimes partway down the process of strategic planning, you'll realize that you need to go back to the highest level and adjust. And then even as you're implementing, you'll make discoveries and again, adjust that plan. Right? And while we like to ground our strategic plans in some data, there is an element of you could even say intuition. You bring the data to bear on the topic, but sometimes you just know what needs to happen. So there's also an idea that strategic planning is only for executives, or that the best ideas flow from the top down with decisions made very narrowly, right? But the best strategic planning involves everyone to some extent. Ideas and insight are drawn from every level, and every suggestion is weighed based on merit, not based on position. So really effective leaders realize that the best strategy is one that gets executed, and execution has a lot to do with buy-in. So the best way to get buy-in is to have your implementers or your staff come up with the solutions yourself. So have a role in the strategic planning. Right, and when I refer to the time horizon of your strategic planning, I mean how far out you should plan. Should you have a 2-year plan? I'm here to tell you that time horizons are flexible and dependent on the nature of your work and the type of organization. People can also be daunted by the lingo or the terminology. So there are goals versus objectives versus strategies and tactics. But I would say don't let that drag you down. And again, the formality of strategic planning makes many people think it's only for companies with complicated org charts, the kind of companies with buildings such as the one illustrated here. But strategic planning, it is forward-looking, and it should stretch your horizons, because if you do look too near, you're going to be thinking about projects. So it is forward-looking in that you should look as far as you can. And for government clients, I used to say, look forward about 3 to 5 years. But again, it's really dependent on the nature of your work and the pace of change. So if you're in a fast-moving sector, you might look forward 12 months, and so on. And again, on the terminology, so the ideas behind the terms are pretty straightforward, and what matters is that everyone in your team agrees on what the words mean in use. So if you like to use objectives instead of goals, as long as everyone agrees, completely fine. And also, every organization can benefit from looking ahead and getting agreement on where to focus, and that's all that strategic planning really is. So it's for every kind of culture and every type of organization. So this was a bit of a mental leap for me too, because as I explained, all of my experience with strategic planning was in person. But strategic planning doesn't have to be a 1 or 2 day session in a stuffy boardroom with a lot of tactile materials. It doesn't have to mean 8-hour sessions at all, and it doesn't have to mean big consulting bills. In fact, the process and the thinking behind strategic planning can be done from anywhere, and those marathon planning sessions can be broken into pieces, and I would argue with better results, because in fact people's best work is done when they just focus on something for 45 minutes to an hour, right? And in terms of whether you can do it yourself, I would say that even if you've never led strategic planning before, and even if your team has no experience with strategic planning, you can do it. So the immediate benefits are really so important for most organizations, right? Especially these smaller, more agile organizations. So I'm going to say that there are quite a few immediate benefits that you're really going to enjoy if you take the time to go through this process. These are some of the short-term perks. One of the ones that I like the most is getting rid of that bottleneck. So when I talk to leaders of remote teams about the benefits of strategic planning, one thing I hear is that it really frees them up as leaders. So instead of getting involved in a lot of micro decisions, when leaders have a strategic plan in place, their employees can make those decisions themselves. So it's really delegating a lot of the day-to-day decisions. Smarter marketing, this is also so important. Part of defining your brand positioning is thinking through your vision, your mission, and your values, and that positioning then becomes the foundation of how you talk about your brand. So your marketing becomes more consistent when you have vision, mission, and values. It all hangs together, and it's more resonant with your potential clients or customers. And then when marketing opportunities come up as well, you have this filter through which to decide where to invest your time and your resources. Less waste. This is another big one for leaders, and it's pretty intuitive to understand, because when you have that clear path mapped out, you can just cut out a lot of wasted time and a lot of wasted financial investments. Finally, having a strategic plan means you're upfront and open about who you are, and you can attract team members and partners who share your values and who are on board with your vision and mission. Okay, so taking it remote. I've probably spent long enough now on the case for strategic planning, so I'd like to cover the key points on how to take it remote. We won't dive into the details of, what tools to use at what agenda item, because you can find a lot of that on the Lucid Meetings website, and I'll give you all of the URLs that you'll need. So really, there are just a few tweaks that you need to make to take strategic planning online. So first of all, as I mentioned, these long marathon strategic planning sessions, they don't really work in person. You're always having to build in breaks and mix things up to keep people's attention past the point where they're really mentally engaged. So online, it's even more important. So you're breaking the whole process of strategic planning. You're thinking of it as like a long sort of string of events, and you're breaking those events into smaller chunks. So you're looking for about an hour long for each chunk, right? So the process I documented for Lucid Meetings breaks down strategic planning into those subtopics, and each subtopic is covered in one meeting. But you also assign pre-work. So when I was facilitating strategic planning, there would always be a certain amount of time that you would spend kind of getting everyone on the same page, educating them. So say you're doing, your vision, mission, values. Well, you spend a significant amount of time in the workshop defining the terms, looking at examples, but in an online environment, what you want to do is assign some really clear pre-work so that people can self-educate and come to the meeting prepared to dive into the collaborative pieces. Right? And then you're also always assigning follow-up work to further refine and advance the plan offline between these sessions that you're holding. So you're not going to get into a lot of wordsmithing or a lot of refining in your online meetings, but you are going to be really clear about the follow-up action items that need to be done before your next session. Okay, so finally, you need to be thoughtful about group size as you do with in-person sessions. So, if you've attended a lot of large workshops, you'll notice that breakout groups are a big part of what makes it work, because people are really best engaged in small groups and online as well. The ideal group size is 6 or fewer participants. So if you have a larger team, it's not about excluding people, it's just about designing a process that works in breakout groups online. So you can talk to me if you'd like some advice on that. That's no problem at all. Does anyone have any questions about these general tweaks for taking it online? Just before I move on, go ahead and drop something in the chat if you have a question.
Looks like not yet. Looks like we're learning.
Okay.
So new.
Cool. All right, so when it comes to tools, I do like to keep things fairly simple. So what you want is a very reliable audio or video conferencing platform. And the nice thing about the Lucid Meetings platform is that you have collaborative space built in, among other features. So for every meeting, you have a notes page where people can type simultaneously. So it's like a shared whiteboard or a shared flip chart. So that's a really nice feature. And if you're not using Lucid Meetings, then you're going to want to look at something like a Google Doc or perhaps Evernote. It's also really easy on the Lucid Meetings platform to use the strategic planning agendas that I developed and that are available on their website. But when you use the meeting platform, it all integrates really, really nicely. Finally, you might want to check out some of the online brainstorming tools that are available. Now, Elise Keith, one of the founders of Lucid Meetings, she wrote a pretty epic blog post on brainstorming tools, just a review of the online brainstorming tools that are out there. So you can use this link and check them out and see what might work for you. So it's replacing some of those more tactile tools like sticky notes that you would use in an in-person session. So you kind of move them around, cluster them, that sort of thing. All right, so the toolkit, which I have referenced here, which is the complete guide to strategic planning for remote teams. What it covers is what we're calling the essential strategic plan, right? So values, vision, mission, goals, strategies, and there's some reference to KPIs, which your key performance indicators or metrics, which you can develop offline, right? But the focus is really on those 5 things. And we just decided that those 5 elements are really going to set you up for success with further planning that you may wish to do. So you may want to progress to more detailed planning. I always do, even for very small businesses. So I like to break strategies down into more discrete tactics. So an example of that is if I have a goal to sell more and a strategy is to raise more awareness, so get in front of more people, then you would break that strategy down into tactics of, say, print advertising, digital advertising, advertising, networking, right? So you're getting more specific and more operational. And that's where your programs and your projects come into play. And sometimes you'll want to capture those programs and projects, which are, very tactical, in an operational plan. So how you kind of devolve that essential strategic plan is really going to depend on your context and the amount of detail that you need. Are there any questions there? Okay. So this is the one-pager that we mocked up that's available, as part of the resources on the Lucid Meetings website. So the beauty of having this one-pager is it forces you to be concise, for one, but when you can get your essential strategic plan on one page, you can pin it up over your desk. You can reference it at a glance, as can everyone on your team. So it's not like a 50-page document that you have to dig out and search through. You know what you need to do at a glance. And on the next page, I just have a sample populated strategy. I have permission from Organics for Orphans to share this, so you can kind of see how it all rolls out. And if you have a bigger, if you use a legal-sized document, you can throw in your metrics or your KPIs. I'm getting a bit of an echo now. Is everyone else okay?
I think I'm okay. It sounds great. Someone had asked, too, if you could possibly talk about the difference between vision and mission.
Yeah, for sure. So your vision is really an image of the future that you wish to create, right? So, it's about the impact that you want to have on the world, and it's kind of the farthest reaching statement, the strategic statement that you're going to make. And your mission statement gets a bit more specific and a bit more practical about what you do, for who, and how. You can, get a really quick sense of that by, I don't mean to defer this, but I just don't have these memorized. But if you do a quick Google of like best vision statements, best mission statements, you'll see some really impressive ones and some good distinctions. But it's also important to know that some people blend the two. So don't get confused. Sometimes if you do a bit of a quick search, you'll find people who have organizations, like even, really high-profile organizations that just have one statement that sort of blends the two together. So like with almost anything in strategic planning, you can adapt, but the important thing is to capture those ideas. The farthest reaching, most aspirational statement about the impact that you want to have on the world, combined with how and for who. Does that help?
And I might be
okay. Well, if I'm not,
I'm probably causing the echoing.
Pardon?
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes.
I was going to say, I just Googled a few, and some of them say a vision, a world without Alzheimer's, or equality for everyone.
Exactly.
Campaign, things like that.
Yeah.
Hunger-free America, things like that. So it's very aspirational.
Yes, exactly. And, we don't always think that way. So it really does help to stretch and to make us more ambitious when we do take that leap and get really aspirational. And like I said, it also really helps with our marketing and our branding, because those aspirational statements are what resonate with people. Those are what have the emotional hook. So I would really encourage you to think big there, think impact. All right, so resources. I imagine that many of you have found these resources on the Lucid Meetings website, but if you haven't, there's a link here, and you can see the agendas just separated out here. You can also, so those are the 5 agendas, the 5 essential meetings. Now you can also download, if you see on the right-hand side here, there's Get the Download, and it's just automatic. You get the complete facilitator guide. So that gives you more detail on, for example, roles, on how the process works, and just pretty much everything you're going to need to run this multi-meeting process, right? So yeah, those are really useful. And I believe that Trisha is going to be, well, I know that she is sending a follow-up email with all of these links. So that wraps up what I wanted to cover today, but now time for Q&A. So I'd like to turn the floor back to Trisha to facilitate that Q&A process. And I'm just going to switch screens or make Trisha the lead here. And I think I'm going to put on my webcam here so we can be a little bit more personal too.
Actually, you want to keep that, will you keep that screen back up? The one that had your question screen, because I didn't have anything prepared for that, but I did have an original. I will show my webcam as well, so that you all can see us. Hello. I did have another question earlier, and if I start echoing, please let me know. It might be my internet connection. I did have a question earlier about. It was a little general, but about getting participation from remote groups. And Carrie had asked that, and if you wanted to talk a little bit about getting participation from remote groups, or Carrie, feel free to ask more detail once we get started.
Yeah, well, a lot of that comes down to the design. So it's kind of baked into the process. So by keeping the group small, that really facilitates participation. By keeping the sessions short, facilitates participation. And if you look at the individual agenda items, sorry, I'm dealing with an echo here, so I'm trying to ignore my own voice. So if you look at the individual agenda items, you can see that people have specific engagement instructions for each piece. So there's a time when they need to be doing their own brainstorming on their own private document, and then there's a time where they're posting those ideas on the shared document, and there are questions for the facilitator, right? So it's all very designed to get that kind of engagement that you need. And that's really where engagement comes from more than anything. It's the design.
Right. I'll give an example of that. Lucid Meetings actually went through the entire process of Anna's templates, and we found that we were doing a lot of planning in between these multiple meetings. And so a lot of the participation was actually happening offline, which I found to be very valuable because it helped with a little more concentration on some of the questions to prepare before the meetings, and then we could always do a wrap afterwards and see how things went. But I enjoyed that process a lot because it didn't force me to think on my feet when I was in the meeting, where that might happen in a group setting when you're face to face, and maybe a group think thing, but everybody kind of separates and brings their own information, which you can do in person too.
Yeah, that's one of the things I like best as well, and it also gives you a bit of time to just sleep on some of the ideas as well. So, what sounded good in the meeting probably needs refining. So just breaking it into these iterative chunks, I think it really does yield better results.
So we had another question from Elise that she had asked, what did you leave out taking the process online, and what doesn't really work as well with remote participants?
What we took out was the duration, really. So it is the same process that I used when I facilitated in-person sessions, but it's just shorter duration meetings, basically, and of course some of the physical aspects. So you're not physically writing on boards or taking sticky notes and moving them around. So yeah, it's the physicality and the duration.
Any other questions anyone has for us while we're here?
Is this something that you're thinking of doing in the near future, or something you've already been doing and maybe want to refine a bit?
Sounds like people want to just learn about how it works. If you had a choice, what would you choose? Would you recommend breaking up your in-person sessions?
Oh yeah, now. Absolutely. I used to be, really interested in kind of efficiency but in a way that was a little bit perverse. I wanted to get as much as I could into those in-person sessions. And, I had a lot of energy because I love strategic planning and I was facilitating. So I just thought, let's just move through, get as much into your one day as you can. And especially working with executives, that mattered, because if you didn't get it all into that one day, you might not get them all together again, right? So, so that was my approach. But you know, as I reflected on it in retrospect, I realized that was pushing people too much and probably not getting optimal results. So I really do believe that splitting it into smaller chunks is more effective, and it just you know, is more suitable for the way we think.
Okay, we do have another question. Can you talk more about who is included in the process and how the decision making should work?
Yeah, for sure. Whoops, sorry, that's something else. Okay, in the actual guide, we break down the roles, and sorry, I was trying to show you the guide, but obviously I'm not that tech adept yet. But in the guide, we do break down all of the roles, and so the roles are, you know, you have a decision maker, you have a facilitator, you often have someone who's kind of the administrator who sets up all of the meetings and makes sure everyone is coming prepared, and then you will often assign roles and responsibilities around follow-up items. So after a meeting, you'll say, okay, so-and-so is responsible for taking all of these ideas, say around your vision statement, and crafting them, doing the kind of copywriting, right? So there are a number of roles, and it's important to distribute those roles, right? So you want as many people to have areas of responsibility as possible. The question of the facilitator can be a little bit tricky depending on your organization. So in organizations where you have like a few departments and each department is doing strategic planning, you can do a bit of a swap, right? So you can have, say, someone from marketing facilitate for operations, someone for operations facilitate for marketing, because as soon as you take on that facilitator role, one, you have a little bit too much power, and two, you don't get to participate. So it's best if you can have someone neutral do the facilitation. When I was doing that consulting for government, one thing we did was set up a network of volunteer facilitators, which is something that you could do if you have, you know, a network of others in your industry, or just, other business owners. So, if your organization isn't large enough that you can have someone who doesn't have a vested interest facilitate, we'll borrow someone from someone else's organization and then agree to do the same for them. The question of the facilitator is a little bit tricky. I would encourage you to make your best effort to find someone who's not vested, and just think outside the box for that, because that is one of the most important roles.
Right. The facilitator guide, which I'll send you a link to, everyone, does have the whole process, the roles, and just how to run all of those meetings, pretty detailed. And so one thing you could do if you did get someone else outside of your organization to facilitate, it walks them through the process very much step by step. So that will help them.
That's right, yeah.
Any other questions? We do have another one, for what it's worth. Elise wanted to just add a little something. She was saying, we included lots of people in the idea generation sessions and priority discussions. Then we assigned owners from leadership to make final drafts and decide what actually went into the plan. That did help quite a bit, because a lot of ideas kept coming about, but it's really difficult at that point for decision making to happen unless you have some actual folks that take that on to have owners, of that decision making. So we did that, and it worked really well.
Mm-hmm. And as long as you're upfront in your sessions about how your decision making happens, so at the start you're going to want to clarify, this is the kind of session where you all contribute ideas, and at the end of the day, so and so will take it away and make the final decision. Or if you're extremely egalitarian, if you may want to say, like, this will happen by voting or by consensus only. Like, we don't close this process until we have complete consensus on the vision, you know what I mean, like each step of the way. So it depends on your decision-making culture. And again, I would just say be very clear upfront on how decisions are made.
Right. And I would just add to that once we made the decisions, it was really nice for our actually, I should say that some of our leadership made drafts of the information and then brought it back to the team and said, "Is this what you said?" So it did become a very back and forth process. And, if it wasn't, then we could probably go back to the drawing table and start over. But decision making in itself is quite an interesting topic. We could maybe do a whole webinar on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So any other questions or comments from the audience? Please feel free to just tell us if anything has worked that you've used before, or if you're planning on doing this in the future. We'd love to help. Anna does this for a living. She loves it, and we obviously love it as well. So any way we can help you in your decision making or your strategic planning, just let us know. Okay, I think that we have one more just said that asking about releasing the recording. And yes, we will. I will go ahead and send a link to that recording to everyone, hopefully by tomorrow. I'm going to try and aggregate all of the resources today, pull it into an email, and send that out tomorrow. That's my goal. And I guess that's all the time we have. So if you have any more questions about what you heard today, you can also email Anna at upstreammeetings.com. And oh, yeah, there you go. Or you can call her. And we really appreciate you joining us today. So thank you so much for your time. Anna, thank you. And I look forward to doing this again.
Yeah, me too. Thank you, Trisha.
All right, thanks everyone for coming.